Great War, a storm that began in Europe, but soon engulfed the entire world. While trenches were carved through France and Belgium, far beyond Europe's borders, another war raged, in burning deserts, dense jungles, and forgotten colonies. Men from distant lands fought and died for empires they had never seen. Ottoman soldiers defending an ancient empire. African warriors resisting foreign invaders. Indian, Arab, and Chinese laborers feeding a war machine that consumed millions. This was not just Europe's war, it was humanity's. Today, on History War Chronicles, we journey beyond the Western Front, to the Ottoman deserts, African battlefields, and distant colonies, where the First World War truly became global, and the forgotten heroes of history still whisper their stories through time. Part 1. The Ottoman Empire enters the Inferno. When the guns of August thundered in 1914, the Ottoman Empire, once mighty, now crumbling, faced a fateful choice. The empire known as the Sick Man of Europe stood at a crossroads between survival and oblivion. Behind closed doors in Istanbul, Ottoman leaders saw an opportunity. Aligning with Germany and Austria-Hungary, they hoped victory might restore their fading power. But this decision would drag their ancient lands into a catastrophe. In November 1914, Ottoman warships under German command bombarded Russian ports in the Black Sea. That single act unleashed a storm. The Ottomans were now at war with Britain, France, and Russia, three empires hungering for their territory. Their first test came in the Caucasus Mountains, where tens of thousands froze to death before firing a single shot. Then came the desperate stand at Gallipoli, where the world watched in awe as Ottoman troops led by a young officer named Mustafa Kemal held back the Allied invasion. Kemal's words echoed through the chaos. "Men, I am not ordering you to attack. I order you to die." The victory at Gallipoli would ignite the birth of modern Turkey, but for the Ottoman Empire, the triumph came at a devastating cost. The war was spreading, and the deserts of Arabia would soon erupt in fire and rebellion. Part 2. The Desert Rebellion. Lawrence and the Arab Revolt. As the Ottoman armies bled across distant fronts, a new threat rose from within: the Arab Revolt. Arab tribes, long under Ottoman rule, began dreaming of independence. In 1916, under Sharif Hussein of Mecca, they raised the banner of revolt, not for the Ottomans, but for a vision of an Arab homeland. But dreams need allies. And the British saw an opportunity. They promised the Arabs freedom if they fought against their Ottoman masters. To aid them, they sent an unlikely hero, a British intelligence officer named T.E. Lawrence, who would become a legend, Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence and the Arab tribes waged a daring guerrilla war, blowing up trains, cutting Ottoman supply lines, and striking deep into enemy territory. Together, they captured Aqaba and advanced toward Damascus as the Ottoman front crumbled. But beneath the sand and smoke, betrayal brewed. While the Arabs fought for freedom, secret agreements between Britain and France, the infamous Sykes-Picot Agreement, were already dividing their lands into colonial zones. By 1918, the Ottomans were collapsing, and the Arab dream of unity turned to dust. Empires had played their game, and the desert had paid the price. The Middle East would never be the same again. Part 3. Africa's Forgotten Soldiers. While Europe's leaders fought for glory, Africa became their silent battleground. Over 2 million African soldiers and laborers were forced or recruited to fight in a war they barely understood. Their fields were burned, their homes destroyed, all for the ambitions of distant empires. In German East Africa, one man turned the continent into a war of ghosts. General Paul von Lettow-Vorbeck, the Lion of Africa. With a small German force and thousands of African Askari soldiers, he waged a relentless guerrilla campaign against the British, Belgian, and Portuguese armies. His strategy was simple: never be caught, never surrender. The war in Africa was brutal. Villages were emptied to feed armies, disease spread faster than bullets, and famine claimed millions of civilian lives. Yet, through suffering, a new consciousness began to rise. Men who had once served European masters returned home with new eyes, realizing that the so-called white empires could bleed and fall. When the guns finally went silent in 1918, Leto Vorbeck was still undefeated on the battlefield. But for Africa, victory brought no freedom, only more lines on maps drawn by foreign hands. Still, the sacrifices of Africa's forgotten soldiers planted the first seeds of resistance, seeds that would one day grow into the movements for independence. Part 4. The World at War. Asia, the Pacific, and the Aftermath. As the Ottoman deserts and African jungles burned, the war's reach extended even further. In Asia, Japan joined the Allies, seizing German colonies across the Pacific and the coast of China, a glimpse of a rising power that would soon challenge the West itself. Across the Indian subcontinent, millions of soldiers served the British crown, believing that loyalty might earn them freedom. Instead, they returned home to poverty and broken promises, fueling revolts that would one day ignite India's independence movement. From the Caribbean to the Pacific Islands, even the smallest colonies sent men, resources, and lives into the inferno of war. World War I had truly become a world war. When peace finally came in 1918, the Ottoman, German, Austro-Hungarian, and Russian empires had vanished. But the peace was fragile, built on greed and broken trust. Borders were redrawn by politicians who had never set foot in the lands they divided. The scars of those decisions still shape the modern world in the Middle East, in Africa, and beyond. The war that began in Europe ended by changing the planet itself. The Great War was not just fought in muddy trenches or European cities. It was fought by millions who had no voice, men and women from distant lands whose blood watered foreign soil. The Ottoman Empire's fall, Africa's forgotten suffering, and Asia's awakening marked the dawn of a new age, an age of rebellion, independence, and rebirth. More than a century later, the echoes of that global conflict still shape our world in borders, in politics, and in the memories of nations once forced to fight for others. This is the story beyond Europe, the story of a world forever changed. You've been watching History War Chronicles, where history's forgotten battles come alive. If you believe these stories deserve to be remembered, like, subscribe and share, because the past still speaks, if we dare to listen.